we're not precious whether that looks at environmental or socioeconomic. We fundamentally believe that they're all intertwined, and we must address the environmental, social, and economic aspects of of how people can thrive in a home, in a neighborhood, on a citywide level.
Welcome to the Green Urbanist, a podcast for urbanists fighting climate change. I'm Ross. Hello, welcome back to another episode. Ross here. This episode is a conversation with Tara and Lanre Gbolade of Gbolade Design Studio.
I'm Tara Gbolade from Gbolade Design Studio. I'm a co-founder here, and we are an architectural practice based in London, in Waterloo in London. And we specialize in sustainability-led developments, whether that be housing, master plan, design coding type work.
Yep, Lanre Gbolade here, other co-founding director.
Reflecting on their 5 years in practice, we discuss a range of topics and projects, including city shaping with master plans and design codes, retrofitting existing buildings, zero carbon and regenerative design and delivering low carbon homes, community building and co-creating with communities that they work with, and even innovation in design and the way that they're using artificial intelligence tools in their practice. All of this is wrapped up in the context of their recent exhibition, which was called Breaking Ground here in London, and their contribution to the Venice Biennale 2023, which is ongoing at the moment. We discuss about a number of their really beautiful and interesting projects. Obviously, you'd like to see images of what they look like, I'm sure, so do look at the episode description and follow the link to the companion blog post where you'll get to see images of all the projects we talk about. And while you're there, you might want to add your email address to the newsletter list, and that way you'll get an email every time there's a new episode or a blog post. And it's a good way of staying in touch with everything that's happening with the Green Urbanist. All right, that's it for now. Enjoy this episode. I think the catalyst for having you on was you've recently had an exhibition in the Africa Centre in London called Breaking Ground. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where that came from and what it's about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Breaking Ground was a really interesting exhibition. We decided to put it on for a couple of reasons. The main one being, as a practice, we turned 5 years old, and we wanted to consolidate and share a lot of our thinking that we've been working on over the last 5 years. We started with a provocation, a question for us, which is, how does architecture respond to our climate and ecological emergencies? And how does urban design respond to women's safety and community cohesiveness? And that was, in effect, the catalyst for opening up what the key 5 topics we would be talking about.
Indeed, and those kind of 5 themes really looked at city shaping, but also looking at retrofit and the mammoth task that the UK has in terms of tackling that agenda. We've also got net zero homes from a new build perspective. We've got community building, and then we've also got innovation in design and construction as well. So those are the 5 overarching themes which we framed the exhibition around.
Excellent, yeah, and I think we can go into each of those in turn, or we can pick a smaller selection to talk in more detail. I guess it's up to you, but I'm definitely keen to hear about the city shaping one for sure.
Yeah, we're happy with either or. We're probably happy to maybe talk through them in that order, in terms of starting with city shaping.
Cool.
And so see how we go. Perhaps.
See how we go. How much time elapses.
Exactly. We might get too stuck into one. So happy to run it in that way. In which case, maybe we'll just start with the general premise of the way we set out the exhibition, and jump into city shaping.
Cool.
So with each of the five themes, the way we arranged them was, in effect, a series of bays. One that gave an overview of our thinking on the particular topic, so city shaping in this instance, and then a couple of case studies that reflected that type of thinking. City shaping really comes from our wider experience, particularly in working with local authorities. Yes, we're architects and urban designers, but because we've worked within local authority we have experienced, losing the red line and losing the red line boundary, which is incredibly important because it allowed us to expand our minds in terms of how we approach placemaking and how we approach the red line, coming back to sort of building level work. For us, we were concerned with a couple of big questions. How do women and children navigate the public realm? What does safety look like in the public realm with city shaping? But also wider questions on environmental emergency. So, what does green infrastructure in good cities? What does that look like? How does that affect the health and well-being of people? Sustainable movements was another key topic we wanted to pick up. And so we used these sort of mini topics, if you like, to talk through a couple of projects, which we're happy to dive into.
Yeah. So in terms of maybe projects, one of the ones that we, I guess, put up as a bit of an example in terms of larger scale kind of thinking in the city shaping sense is some element of reference to our work on Waterloo Station. So whilst we haven't actually got loads to show by way of design, obviously a lot of that is at this moment in time confidential and very much still work in progress with our overarching client in terms of Lambeth Council and Network Rail. We did begin to kind of, I guess, share some of our ways of thinking around the research that maybe we undertake in relation to setting out some element of a framework to actually support the delivery of design kind of interventions and thinking. So that project was really interesting for us from a historical perspective in terms of looking at the surrounds of the particular site in terms of Waterloo Station and its surrounds, Lambeth as a whole in terms of the borough, but also looking at other areas that kind of, this red line kind of now spreads out into terms of the South Bank and other areas. And we really pulled out a lot of, historical research that kind of looked at the role of women in shaping Lambeth over time, and interesting facts like I think it's the Ladies' Bridge or the Women's Bridge, which was rebuilt into the Waterloo Bridge, was rebuilt by a large amount of women engineers and makers.
Following the war.
Following the end of the Second World War and obviously the reconstruction of the UK, but also looking at the history in terms of demographics, especially in relation to the Windrush generation and the impact that they have had in terms of shaping the dynamics within Lambeth and around Waterloo as well, where the first generation from the Empire Windrush landed into in terms of the main station in London that came into. So. That project is really a big one for us in terms of operating at that scale and influencing decision making at that scale, and really getting into the nitty gritty of what it means to create successful places that integrates good urban design, considers safety for young people, for women, but also considers obviously the practicalities of navigating a big infrastructure kind of hub like Waterloo Station.
Absolutely. I think one of the interesting parts of Waterloo Station in terms of our role there. We're working with a wide consultant team, as you can imagine, and it's led by the infrastructure aspect. Certainly, is led by Grimshaw, and so we are looking at a lot of public realm work. And meanwhile, space. Our particular role in city shaping here, we don't have a red line boundary, or at least it's very fluid, our red line boundary when it comes to the station. So the streets around Westminster Bridge Road, York Road, they all come into our thinking, and certainly placemaking. We think about stitching in particular sites that have been underutilized or have been left abandoned. So, such as Emma Cumm's Gardens, where it is massively underutilized at the moment, is a patch of green, which is in a prominent location on Waterloo Road. And over the years, there are propositions that have come forward for that site. But here we look at how we can work with the community, the wider Lambeth community, and different community groups to see the best way of addressing sites like that. So a lot of our work includes engaging with a wide variety of people and bringing an aspect of co-creation with people in terms of looking at propositions for these. We've also done a lot of work identifying key meanwhile spaces in and around Waterloo Station, underutilized spaces where we're looking further ahead at longer term developments coming forward. But in the interim, what could these spaces be used for, and could they test? Could these particular sites that we've identified be used to test particular ideas, whether that be promoting the art and culture scene? We've got the graffiti tunnel here on Leek Street, which is an extraordinary gem. We like to say in Waterloo. So does one perhaps protect and enhance something like that? But also recognizing that Waterloo is a tree desert, and it has a lot of air pollution around us here. So how do we use green infrastructure, stretch the ambition of green infrastructure, and also look at different types of and characters of green infrastructure that we can introduce in and around Waterloo Station to be able to maximize people's use of the station and around it.
Yeah. So that's one project that's right on our doorstep, and we actually literally are a stone's throw away from Waterloo Station. So a lot of the, I guess, challenges that we've heard about in terms of from an engagement perspective, but also that we've identified through our own kind of research, we're seeing every day, and we experience that. So it's quite good to be literally on the ground for this kind of project. In terms of other projects?
We can maybe speak to design coding, which are a couple of other types of projects that we work on. I'll give an example. At the moment, we're working on, we've worked on a couple in Southwark at the moment, so perhaps I'll speak about one that's a piece of work that's already completed, which is Old Kent Road 16, which looks at Hatcham and Ilderton Road, and there we were looking at design coding with, again, larger practice, Farrell's there, so we tend to collaborate quite a bit. Just as a practice style, we really enjoy learning from others and being able to input in that way as well. So this is for Southwark Council, and their sort of 2,000 new homes are coming forward in the area, which has been agreed in their area action plan. So one of our main roles in this design coding work was really picking up on the NMDC, so National Model Design Code, and seeing how we can apply it in a very specific way to the Hatcham and Ilderton area. Hatcham and Ilderton is sort of the boundaries of the site. It's really heavily constrained. We're in the east. We've got Ilderton Road. It has a lot of vehicular traffic, so the air pollution there is quite significant. It's a mainly industrial site, so we're bringing in residential or proposals for residential are coming through. So really how we understand and navigate co-location in that industrial and residential, how do they work together? How do we bring in other uses to make sure that residents feel safe to navigate new streets or existing streets? Understanding the grid system that Hatcham and Ilderton have as an area, particularly after it was bombed in the war, and the new street network that came in following that. But then also looking at design coding for the buildings themselves, particularly because we have this grid structure. We'll have south-facing buildings, so coding where we look at incorporating really deep balconies, for example, on the south-facing facade. So we're thinking about overheating from the outset and that being coded in. So I think our role there was really interesting because, as an architect, it's incredibly tempting to start design. One has to pull themselves back all the time and stop oneself, but leave a lot of creativity, a lot of flexibility for eventual architects to be able to take high-level design coding further.
What's your sense with design coding? Because this is something that is really topical in the UK now and in England, and local authorities having to start developing them, and maybe it's quite new for a lot of people. What's your sense about design coding being a useful tool, and how do you make a code useful, I guess?
That's a big question.
Yeah, good question. And I think we definitely support the increasing use of design codes. We think they can be an effective tool to shape cities, but also to shape towns, villages, and support developers, local authorities, and architectural teams and design teams to have, I guess, a good framework to begin working with and setting out some of the priority themes. So the National Model Design Code provides some element of a good framework to that. And then I think design codes drive into a little bit more of the specificity around a particular context and having some element of, I guess, agreed kind of baseline in terms of what will be supported should those, I guess, guidelines be adhered to. But I think critically, they should also provide a good amount of flexibility, like Tara mentioned earlier, to enable good design still to come through and not have identikit kind of binoculars being replicated as a result of a very controlled and limiting design code. We do need flexibility, but the very best ones allow that and allow architects and designers to still respond creatively to the local context.
Yeah, I think that point, particularly about identity, is really important because I think design codes are critical in shaping the vision of an area, particularly where you're working with existing areas, existing communities. The example with the Hatcham and Ilderton, there are existing businesses there who may have been there for generations. Their parents may have owned a particular factory. Or make a space, and that's been passed on in the family, who want to stay, and they have an ambition to stay in that space. So actually understanding the history of a place makes design code really important to ensuring that culture, that identity, that character is carried forward, even with new development coming forward. And it makes a place special. It means that you're able to go down the road and have a different experience because it has a different history. They're critical because they unify, particularly the public realm, but they unify a user's, a pedestrian's, a resident's, a worker's view of a particular place. And I think it really allows people to become invested in a particular, it becomes yours, in a particular place. So design codes serve a really powerful process, but particularly when the local community are involved in the creation and development of that as well.
It's really interesting because I think it's like, I think people have this idea about design codes as being really precise and specific and sort of comprehensive. But actually I've seen ones that are really bare bones and just sort of tie in a couple of key elements and then sort of let architects do the rest. Like we did organized a study tour a while ago to East Village in Stratford. So what was the Olympic athletes housing and now sort of a high density residential neighborhood. And it was Fletcher Priest Architects. And they said, yeah, we had a kind of a design code. We basically just gave a fairly limited color palette for the buildings. And then basically all of the interface between the public realm and the sort of private space, they all have the same railings and gates.
Yeah,
and it was like, and I never noticed it until he pointed it out, and I was like, "That is genius," because it does make it so cohesive. But every building can be different. So that was like a very clever use of codes, I think.
In fact, and it's a good point actually in terms of I think the limitation on the Hatcham Ilderton design code was very much no more than 30 pages, which was instructed by the client. And that was a good move, even though it was challenging. It absolutely speaks to having something that is a little bit more concise, controlled, and provides good direction, but doesn't limit, creativity and the ability to kind of reflect the true character of that place and take it on.
Absolutely, there were key aspects certainly with this that brought forward a sort of character of the area. That we coded on pocket parks, for example, because of the grid layout of this of the Hatcham and Ilderton area. We spoke to you mentioned brick colors there, but we spoke to that type of narrative as well, but also perhaps where signage might be accommodated on ground first floors and looking at floor to ceiling heights, particularly on the ground, because that really spoke to the existing context, excluding what would be coming forward in terms of 8-10-story height residential above, for example. So that really spoke to that, but also perhaps where service yards would be located and how they would navigate themselves through particular blocks, so that the street networks were kept free and some were clearly identified for pedestrians versus vehicular or delivery routes. I think one thing that's quite special about Hatcham and Ilderton is because of how diverse the area is, there's so many people from so many different backgrounds. We started to explore this idea of patterning and lost and found, and that's because of the industrial nature, the types of artwork, the artworks or the creativity or creative industries specifically that occur in those spaces. So it really is about retaining what's special about a place and then adding to.
Let's move into maybe the retrofit challenge.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is probably a big topic for us, and I guess some element of a major kind of issue in the UK. So we know that 80% of the homes that we'll need by 2025 are already built in the UK, and most of these will actually need to be retrofitted. So that number actually represents somewhere in the region around 28 million homes that will need to be transformed. The vast majority of which are semi-detached, terraced, detached properties. And some of them will be under different ownership structures, which obviously complicates things in some ways in terms of private versus local authority versus housing associations. Not to mention the fact that some are listed and also maybe located in conservation areas. So the challenge is monumental, but also the opportunity is, for us, even greater.
Absolutely. I think for us, part of the exhibition here focused on what Lanre has highlighted, the overall challenge. And then we used a couple of projects to maybe hone in on what we're certainly experiencing within practice. We find that a lot of our clients are coming to us specifically because of our lean into addressing the climate challenge. And for us, we try to identify, and you'll not be surprised by this, we try to identify from the outset unintended consequences, as well as, of course, the gain. So with starting always with a whole a whole house retrofit approach, and we have an in-house template that we use, one that we created and use quite well, which can be adapted depending on the type of home. We're working on both listed buildings and buildings that aren't listed but might be located in a conservation area. So we know that there are different constraints that occur there, whether that be planning, which forces you down a particular route, perhaps internal wall insulation, or where those constraints don't exist, then we might look at external. The range in terms of targets of what we meet really varies. Some clients come through and don't really have a target, whereas others will say we want to meet NFIT standards, and we're happy to work across both lines, identifying what's most appropriate for a project. In terms of those unintended consequences that I just started to highlight, we know a lot of them: overheating, or when we add X amount of insulation, therefore recognizing that ventilation strategy becomes incredibly important, and whether, say, an MVHR unit might be most appropriate for addressing a particular home. We try to be, we aim to challenge our clients and push our clients, particularly because as an industry we become, of course, more cognizant and more aware of operational carbon and how we address that. But specifically on embodied carbon, we are starting to use more bio-based materials, more natural materials, so wood fiber insulation, or indeed timber for structure. And we tend to work quite hard with our consultants. I think our consultants think we push them a bit to address that with us and to step up to the challenge as well. And I think I'm really heartened to hear more and more consultants going on, sort of structural MEPH consultants going on courses that are sort of regenerative development or regenerative design courses, which I think makes our lives much easier because we're already starting from a place where they have a really good understanding of what we're all trying to work towards.
Can we pause on that topic for a second, the regenerative design aspect? What do you mean by that, and how does that sort of play into your work?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do you want to start or shall I?
Yeah, I'm happy to tackle it. I guess, when we think about regenerative design, what we're really focusing on is a much more, I guess, holistic view of development, but also sustainability that very much looks in some ways at the circular aspect of development, in terms of both material use, but also actually how we think about, from this very beginning in terms of design all the way through to construction, and then also to a kind of recycling or the next life of a building. Key for us is obviously consideration of the materials that we potentially specify, and where those materials are coming from, how they are constructed, how they are made, in terms of their production, but then also what they also give back to the building and the users as well. So we're very much looking at clean materials that very much create conditions internally that are healthy environments, and help to, I guess, rather than just providing a good baseline, actually help to regenerate the people, but the spaces that they are also operating in. So, for example, something like our potential use of moss walls externally in a project. In an area that maybe is highly polluted, we're looking to use regenerative materials to address the microclimatic conditions there, which might be around, poor air quality, for example.
I think that's the headline, to be honest. For us, fundamentally, it requires a paradigm shift, not just for us, but our clients as well, and going on that journey together and recognizing that not all projects will have all aspects addressed in a single project, perhaps, but recognizing that every win we're able to build upon with the next project, and hopefully we're able to share those case studies. So as an industry, we continue to be collaborative in moving the industry forward. So we're always coming from the perspective of what here do we need to protect, what here do we need to enhance, and whether that's protecting an existing building, whether that's protecting an existing way of life, in terms of how people have a particular lifestyle. We're not precious whether that looks at environmental or socioeconomic. We fundamentally believe that they're all intertwined, and we must address the environmental, social, and economic aspects of how people can thrive in a home, in a neighborhood, on a citywide level.
Exactly. So the reference that I made there to moss walls is one aspect in terms of addressing some element of the social and environmental. But our interventions, like Tara said, are not necessarily, we can't apply some solution to every project, but it's about actually understanding the intricacies of a particular project, the local context, and finding the regenerative solutions that may address social issues, economic issues, as well as environmental design issues as well.
Yeah.
And we try as much as possible to bring some of that thinking to the point of supporting the local environments that we're in as well, by regenerating businesses, local businesses, or local community groups through our design interventions, but also our engagement process as well as part of the design development.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. I like that sort of like shifting levels of thought about it, from the sort of planetary carbon all the way down to like the local business and local economy,
absolutely,
social side of it.
Yeah. That's absolutely critical for us. And actually, in putting this particular exhibition for us, it's a challenge we put to ourselves. This is why exactly we hosted it in the Africa Center, because it's down the road from us. We used plants from the local travel cafe over here. We had recycled board that we printed on, but again, using a local business. For us, it was really important that we supported local businesses. And I think we 100% were able to do so. We had the local schools involved in particulars of school days. So for us, it really is beyond just the environmental. And we have to think deeply, but it's important.
Yeah. Lovely. Where do you want to take us next?
Next, maybe we can run through to net zero homes, or at least sustainable development with new build, where we're working on a couple of projects. One in Crystal Palace at the moment, where we've designed this to our IBA 2030 climate challenge goals. So meeting quite low operational and embodied carbon targets there is the headline. And again, using natural materials such as wood fiber and and timber structural construction as well. Well, that there will be a mix actually of both timber masonry as well. So again, this is a project that we worked really hard with a client on. We had a really great, willing client who was happy to be challenged, who was happy to be tested, who was happy to be pushed to meeting higher standards. And we're really lucky that they were they were open to the challenge. And so this is a series of 8 townhouses, all new build, on a really quite narrow, tight site that has a significant change of level, which means that part of our work looked at using the natural, so the levels of the site as well, rather than digging or filling. So being able to maximize use there was actually a project that had planning on it. So we had to do some redesign. And it was at a time when at the time we started the project, we were in lockdown. So we were all rethinking how we work from home, what the future of work would look like, what the future of living at home would look like. And so we redesigned these homes to have taller floor to ceiling heights, to improve on natural ventilation, on ventilation in the homes, but also accommodates of work from home spaces as well. So really, really great spaces that we accommodated, accommodating sort of particular, playing with where we position roof lights to ensure that we're bringing natural light deep into the floor plans. Again, losing or reducing our reliance on energy and electricity that way as well.
Yeah, from a technical perspective, we did do a lot of work with the consultant team, especially engineers, especially structural, to kind of look at how could we be more sustainable and regenerative in, I guess, our approach. So we spent a lot of time re-optimizing the structure to lighten the foundations by reducing the amount of concrete structure by using void formers below ground, kind of reduce the amount of literally concrete thickness in the foundations. I made a huge difference in terms of embodied carbon, but also looking at glulam beams, exposed glulam beams where we could, which created a good kind of aesthetic kind of feature internally, but also again addressed embodied carbon, and obviously some element of off-site manufacturing as well with posi joists, off-site manufactured timber posi joists. Which again helped with distribution of MEPA services as well in a really kind of efficient, clean way, but ultimately helping to produce a much more sustainable home.
It is a fossil fuel-free development, as you'd expect. So air source heat pumps used, as well as our sort of MVHR. And again, we worked hard with our sort of MEPH consultants there in challenging what our operational and embodied carbon would look like. So there were a few iterations back and forth, but that was super important for us to understand. It was really important for the client to understand, so that collectively, when we get to site, we're all singing off the same hymn sheet.
And we've got some solar panels in there as well, just for good measure. So lots of different bits of kit, but yeah, really ambitious client, and hopefully that should be completed end of this year.
Great.
Really, really lovely homes. Actually, we're excited about them.
That's really cool, and I think it's really interesting to hear that sort of design process and how much work it does take to get to that point of like a very low carbon home. From your sort of experience and your thinking, because obviously we need to get to a point where everything we're delivering is net zero carbon eventually. Like, what's the missing? How do we bridge that gap from where we are now to get to that standard thing?
I personally think it requires a few carrots and a few sticks. Sticks being policy, yet carrot being doing the right thing. In that we need more businesses, more clients to make bolder commitments, and to be true to that. Let's address greenwashing, but to be true to making real commitments and not just offsetting everything. I think it's really important that as consultants, the whole consultant team, we all make particular commitments that we will challenge our clients where we have briefs in front of us that are below par. And we try to change hearts and minds. UK GBC, UK Green Building Council do really great calls on sustainable leadership, which, personally, I believe everyone needs to go on. You don't have to be C-suite, you don't have to be the exec. It's important for everyone to go on courses like this, because it really addresses what we mean by leadership. And I think consultants, clients will feel more empowered to make better decisions. We're all on this journey together, and I think it's okay that we're all in that journey together. But we need both large and small companies in terms of client base to make bolder commitments. We need small and large companies in terms of consultants to make bolder commitments as well.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, but also provide maybe a slightly different perspective as well. So yeah, policy, definitely. I think we're moving in the right direction with various kind of targets that are kind of being put forward in terms of future home standards and others, and the various standards that are out there in terms of LETI and RIBA 2030. Passive house been around for quite a while, but I think for me, I'd probably say there's probably two main kind of actors. One, I think the public, and I think we've seen the last couple of years that the public have started to demand better performing homes, especially from a new build perspective. I think retrofit probably needs kind of more public kind of voice to kind of really push that forward, but there's a great opportunity there. But I think we're beginning to see, increasing demand for both tenants and homeowners, potential home buyers, should I say, for better performing homes, and then being a little bit more informed and armed with sustainability kind of linked, purchasing questions. So that's going to make any developer kind of sit up and go, oh, hang on a minute, we need to do something about this, rather than just hitting the baseline of building regs, which is we all know ridiculously standard. And then in terms of I guess maybe on the supply side, policy will help, but also I think in terms of supply side, I think we need to address the skills kind of issue to kind of accelerate the actual delivery of more sustainable homes to the market. We don't probably have enough skilled, labourers who understand and construction delivery kind of partners who understand the intricacies of retrofit, for example, to deliver it to NFA standards. But also, if we're trying to achieve nearer towards passive house standards, then again, we need the supply chain to really kind of step up in terms of their own kind of partners' capabilities, in terms of their own supply chain labor capabilities. So those are probably the two areas that I think, we kind of need to address.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Was that course you referenced, Tara? Is that the Future Leaders course from UKGBC?
That's it. Yes,
Yeah,
that's it.
my partner took that last year or the year before, and she found it really impactful as well. So,
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, no,
like a
it's
really good one.
it is a really good one. It really asks you to reflect, and you're in there with such a diverse bunch of people in terms of level of experience, type of roles. So you're reflecting on quite I think, 360 degree base. So absolutely encourage everyone to to jump on that course.
Great, free advertisement there for UKGBC.
Exactly.
Cool. You want to take us on to another topic, or whatever else you have next to tell us about?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Innovation.
Yeah, let's try and kind of speed up a little. But so one of our other topics was innovation in design and construction, which for us kind of looks a little bit more of our, I guess, experimental side of practice. So as a practice, we are quite innovative in terms of our thinking, but also our ability to kind of try new methodologies of working in terms of our workflows, new applications, innovative applications that are coming forward. So one thing that we've always been looking at over the last few years, since we started practice, have been generative design tools to look at how we can increase kind of productivity in terms of workflow from a design perspective, and looking at residential design. So very much keen on weaving that in as much as possible to deliver ultimately for our clients in terms of efficiency and certainty.
One aspect that's really important for us in terms of innovation specifically is trying to sort of maximize automation, trying to maximize AI as much as possible, as all these tools seem to be, being hurdled at us at pace. But it's really important, I think, as a small practice, but as a small business in a changing world, I really see certainly we certainly have been talking about the future really not necessarily being owned by all the larger businesses, but smaller practices, because we have so much more technology available to us, being able to harness that, being able to use this, being able to test ideas quickly, break things, adapt, change, iterate, move on quite quickly. And we do that with tools like Lanre has highlighted, either generative design, where we are looking at a master plan in Southwark at the moment, and very much using that to identify the optimum number of units, using the tools that currently all architects, I think, are exploring, whether that be ChatGPT or Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, the lot. I think we're getting very excited about what the future holds for our sector, our industry. Yeah.
Yeah, but we are actually trying to use it in the most practical way as well. So it's about trying to find ways that will enhance our workflows and help us to be more efficient, but also deliver increase in quality for clients, and also have fun along the way as well. So we don't mind kind of if it doesn't work. We try it out for a week or two. If it doesn't work, we kind of move it aside and kind of move on. But the pace of change right now means that really, as a small practice, we can't afford to not try. I think putting it bluntly, like if you don't, you get left behind because things are moving so quickly in this space. So there will be some element of competitive advantage to be had by finding the right tools and slotting them into one's workflow. So yeah, we're always keen to do that, and the team love it as well.
Exactly.
What would that look like for you in terms of a workflow, in terms of using this stuff? And if you can tell us as well, what is generative design, just for people who haven't heard of it?
Yeah. So cool.
Generative design really uses AI to identify what, certainly perhaps because we're using it on residential developments, uses AI to identify the best solutions for layouts, for example. So flat layouts, 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds, 4 beds, or 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds, mainly. With looking at master plans specifically. So we're using tools like TestFit at the moment. We know that Finch 3D is out there at the moment. We don't yet have access to that, but that looks really interesting. But being able to drive really quick iterative design solutions, particularly when we have an idea or strong idea on massing and form and maximizing light intake, they're really useful to be able to quickly allow us to understand the number of units, introduce calls as necessary in line with regulations, and iterate.
Yeah, one of the things that we find, actually, there's quite a few tools out there, and it's still that space whereby there's not one kind of solution for one size fits all. So it's about finding the right tools to do the right job at the right time in the most efficient way. So we kind of explore to kind of do that, but there are loads of tools emerging constantly. So we have to keep on top of that to ensure that we're not missing the trick somewhere and not being as efficient and productive as we can be.
I think people often underestimate just how time-consuming design work is. Like it's just incredibly difficult to do something well, and within those sort of timeframes that maybe clients sometimes think is possible. So I think if you can sort of get the sort of grunt work done by AI and sort of leave the more creative work, artistic work for yourself, then that seems like a good idea.
That's it. I think exactly any architect will tell you that even just kind of setting up a model file and beginning to kind of create a massing kind of model will still take some time if you do it in the traditional conventional way. But using generative design can help you to iterate a large number of potential options, but eliminate 80% of them that are absolute crap, and get that 20% that you actually want to spend time kind of actually interrogating properly, rather than having 50 great options or 50 potential options, but really you don't want to be wasting time knowing that actually you're only going to explore potentially costing up 2 or 3 maximum.
And it leaves a lot of room for innovation in terms of creativity. It leaves a lot of room for creativity. So I think we're very excited about how we continue to use these, and I think more and more practices of all scales are exploring what this looks like for them as well.
Yeah, Excellent. Well, okay, just looking at the time, I'd love to keep chatting about this, but
Yeah.
I'll have you back on sometime for all the extra questions I didn't have time to ask you. Should we have a chat about this sort of community building aspect?
We can maybe just focus on the last bit. I know you wanted to pick up Venice Biennale. Should we?
Yeah,
Just taking
absolutely.
notes. I'm agreeing with you at the time. So
For sure, exactly. Yeah. So you've just come back. How was that?
Yeah.
Venice was amazing. So
Very good.
it was absolutely brilliant. We the 18th Biennale di Venezia was curated by Leslie Loco, who's a Ghanaian Scottish Ghanaian architect and practitioner, and she really set a strong agenda around decarbonization and decolonization in the exhibition entitled "The Laboratory of the Future," where she invited 89 guest practitioners to exhibit across both the Arsenale and the Giardini this year. So it was a fantastic atmosphere. Felt like we met all of London out there, actually. So it was good fun.
Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Obviously, it was our first time kind of exhibiting at the Biennale. But I think it was really kind of impactful for us, obviously, being of West African heritage. We're both Nigerian, both myself and Tara. Leslie's curation of the exhibition was very much focused on Africa as a potential laboratory of the future in terms of, obviously, youngest population in terms of continents on the globe, probably. Fastest growing continent, and extremely kind of rich in terms of resources, but which had been exploited, obviously, over the last couple of centuries. So she was proposing or propositioning, I guess, to the exhibitors what I guess our take was on that. And her particular interest in inviting us to participate was centered around, obviously, some of our work actually in relation to a project that we'd worked on with Lanre Council, which was the Lloyd Leon Community Centre in Brixton.
Absolutely. So our installation really focused on, and actually it was entitled Regenerative Power. And again, we started with a provocation, which is really asking the question on how can architecture connect people and their history to inspire a future generation? And what we looked to do with this particular installation was shift the center of how we traditionally, as practitioners, as architects, approach looking at a site. So rather looking at the physical constraints of a site to start with, so the red line boundary, it's a building's connection with the street, a building's connection with its neighboring buildings in terms of massing and height. We look to shift that to focus on the regenerative power of people, place, and communities. The people being the Domino's Club and the Brixton Soup Kitchen, who are incumbents in the existing Lloyd Leon Community Centre in Brixton, in London. The place being Brixton, London, and specifically the LLCC, which is a listed building, is a pair of semi-detached Tudor-style homes that has been transformed over the years to a community centre and was actually given to the Lloyd Leon Community Centre in the 1980s, 1981, following the Brixton riots, and handed over to a group of people who were from the Windrush generation or descendants of those from the Windrush generation. So it carries a lot of political weight, this particular project, and then the organizations, both the community center, but also wider organizations like the Gbolade Initiative and Black Cultural Archives. So really identifying these key groups and looking at how we can protect what they have, understanding the relationships between them and protecting those. But then building upon those, coming back to protect and enhance, which is very much a theme of how we practice, looking at how we can enhance how they organize themselves, how they move through space, and how they play dominoes and continue to impact the community around them.
Yeah, and I guess without giving too much away, we do want people to go out there and see for themselves. But a key part of our exhibit was very much focusing on a systems map, which I guess helps to connect or begin to at least illustrate how those connections, in terms of people, place, and community, kind of begin to interlink, and begin to shape the narrative of the potential intervention that may come forward. So for us, it was quite, I guess, powerful to be able to demonstrate some element of our methodology, in terms of how we practice on any project, in terms of making these connections through systems thinking and systems maps, but also bring it out on a project that we're working on. And so far, we found that it's been really well received, and it kind of resonated a lot, because the exhibit also displayed, I guess, some video footage that had been captured by our collaborator, David Japanutra, who produced a great video on the Domino's Club itself, and also some really kind of powerful imagery captured by another co-collaborator in terms of Kimmy Gill photography as well. So, it's been really, really, really cool. So hopefully, Ross, you'll get out and see for yourself. Venice is running until November this year, so plenty of time.
Definitely, plenty of time. I think one last sort of important and really interesting part of this, of creating this or curating this, was really looking at ideograms, and specifically Nsibidi ideograms, where we're connecting this history to a particular people. And Nsibidi ideograms were used, this sort of 15th century graphics, 5th century graphics, which were used across West Africa. And this is how people communicated to each other. Different groups of people were able to communicate in this way. And through forced migration, this language or this way of communication was erased to a degree, even though some people carried them along with them from West Africa to the Caribbean, and now to the UK as well. And so we wanted to pull back into that history, because it was something that certainly, being a West African, is something that we found empowering. And every time we were around this group of people who had to teach us how to play dominoes, who fed us before every single project meeting, we're always well watered and well fed, and felt empowered every time we left them. And we really wanted to use this as an exhibition to celebrate this really powerful group.
Yeah, and the being empowered didn't come from just the food and the alcohol. It was the kind of stories, the history. I think we took away something every time we spoke with them, and every time we volunteered and engaged with them. It was very much a case of learning more and finding out things which we probably wouldn't have kind of, come to understand or learn if we went through the traditional process of just kind of, traditional stakeholder engagement.
Yeah,
So
we really immersed ourselves with them and what they do on a daily basis or weekly basis. And I think that allowed us to draw out stories and narratives we definitely wouldn't get around a 2-hour meeting table.
I mean, I just think you really lived their experience, and I think getting that lived experience, I just imagine if every architect and master planner had to do that before each project, I think our built environment would look very different and probably a lot better.
I completely agree.
What a great process.
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, it's so interesting, super good. And I think just as we're sort of coming to a close, I think if you need to shoot off, we can finish here. But we had our sort of final question as well. If you had any thoughts on that, we can wrap up with that as well.
Sure.
The final question was, 2050. Yeah. This was a hard one.
This is my sort of looking to the future type question, and I guess trying to encourage people. A lot of sustainability is about sort of trying to avoid pain, in a sense, and trying to avoid bad things happening. And sometimes we lose sight of actually that we should be imagining a better future and what that could be. So my final question is, imagine you're in the year 2050. And I guess everything you've been talking about in this podcast has happened, and we've taken appropriate action on the climate and biodiversity crises. So from your perspective, what would the world be like in that situation?
Thanks.
I don't mind. I can go.
I think we'd be... I expect there'd be less conflict in the world. I hope and I expect that we're all able to get along, not necessarily agree with each other, but find better ways of negotiating with each other, with different cultures, with different groups of people, with people who think differently from us. I think that where we've addressed Yeah, it really is futurism. Well, we've addressed the key critical aspects on decarbonization, but certainly for me personally, decolonization as well. I do strongly believe that we're able to get along, and I know that's utopian, but this idea of us coming up with new ideas, new imaginations, new creativity can really come out of a place where there's more peace in the world. So I think it's from that perspective that I come through. We might not all be holding hands singing "Kumbaya," but I think loneliness would have been vastly reduced. We'd perhaps just be living in neighborhoods where we're more connected with each other, where we speak to each other more, where we allow space for each other, where we hold space for each other. So that's what a future in my world looks like.
Yeah, definitely agree with all of that. I think in my mind, 2050 to me looks very green, very fresh, very regenerative in the sense that I guess I see a much more equitable but also more regenerative environment. So the only way I can probably put it is having been in Venice in the last week. I saw an Afrofuturism exhibit by an artist called Olalekan Japhus. It's definitely worth checking out, but the imagery that he created was very much one of a Afrofuturistic, sustainable, regenerative environment, which is very lush, very green, very natural, and we'd hope that we have. I'd hope that by 2050 we have our kind of local ecosystems really kind of thriving in a regenerative way where they're very self-sustaining. We have self-sustaining kind of micro communities that are supporting each other through local businesses. This 15-minute kind of, I guess, kind of 15-minute city principle maybe is taken, full kind of hold. And we built up the infrastructure from a socio-economic perspective to enable us to have a really kind of, regenerative environments to live in that is really clean and healthy for young, for old, for women, for young girls, for men, for whole of society, basically. So, yeah, that's what we're working towards. A green 2050.
Wow.
Truly green.
I can't wait to get there.
Us too.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been such a great conversation. I think there's been so many little nuggets of wisdom and great exploration within that. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been
you.
absolutely our pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.